Hello and welcome to this week's World Panorama. I am Vishal Dahiya. Let's first take a look at the headlines. NATO's differences spill over in public. A summit of 29-nation bloc witnesses heated exchanges between presidents of United States of America and France. US President Donald Trump cut short his summit visit. Nationwide strike cripples France. Thousands take to the streets in protest against President Emmanuel Macron's plan to radically reform pension system. Key transport services come to a standstill in many cities. U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi tells House Judiciary Committee to draft articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. American president denies any wrongdoing, calls investigations a hoax. OPEC countries to cut oil output by an additional 5 lakh barrels per day. Saudi Arabia and Russia claim the measure is intended to head off global oversupply in 2020 and sustain prices. And migrant boat capsizes off Mauritania. 62 people reported drowned. 150 migrants, mostly Gambians, were attempting to reach Spain's Canary Island when their boat hit a rock. And this week, our top story is the NATO Summit that was held earlier this week. Now, NATO started out in 1949 with just 12 countries as its members. Over the years, it has expanded to the 29-nation bloc that it is today. But the differences that are threatening to tear it apart were in full view of the world in the form of some heated exchanges between the presidents of United States of America and France. It also led to US President Donald Trump cutting short his trip.
Hours before the 70th anniversary summit of the NATO alliance, presidents of France and the US clashed with each other over Syria, Turkey, import tariffs, and the future of the Western alliance. Launching a pre-summit broadside, US President Donald Trump called the comments of French counterpart Emmanuel Macron nasty and very insulting. This was in response to Macron stating last month that NATO was suffering brain death. In retaliation, Trump said NATO serves a great purpose and France is one of the biggest beneficiaries of the alliance.
Well, I think it clearly meant that the organization is suffering from a lack of resources because President Trump has been threatening to cut down the US contribution to NATO. And when the contributions dry up, then naturally NATO will suffer. And I think the indication which President Macron was making was that resources are going to be a problem and hence NATO will be brain dead.
It's a tough statement, though, when you make a statement like that. That is a very, very nasty statement to essentially 28, including them, 28 countries. I think that you have a very high unemployment rate in France. France is not doing well economically at all. They're starting to tax other people's products, so therefore we go and tax them. It's just taking place right now on technology, and we're doing their wines and everything else. And it's a very tough statement to make when you have such difficulty in France. You look at what's happened with the yellow vests, or you look at what's going on during certain parts of their season. They've had a very rough year. And you just can't go around making statements like that about NATO. It's very disrespectful. Nobody needs NATO more than France. And frankly, the one that benefits really the least is the United States. We benefit the least. We're helping Europe. Europe unites and they go against a common foe that may or may not be a foe. Can't tell you that. But there are other foes out there also. But I think nobody needs it more than France. And that's why I think that when France makes a statement like they made about NATO, it's a very dangerous statement for them to make.
The French president, on the other hand, stood by his comments about the health of NATO. He firmly expressed his frustration that the US president withdrew hundreds of American troops from Syria in October without consulting NATO allies, and which gave Turkey a green light to launch operations against Syrian Kurdish forces, who played a key role in clearing up a huge swath of Syria of the Islamic State.
And I'm sorry to say that we don't have the same definition of terrorism around the table. When I look at Turkey, they now are fighting against those who fight with us, who fought with us, shoulder to shoulder against ISIS. And sometimes they work with ISIS proxies. This is an issue, and this is a strategic issue. If we just have discussion about what we pay, and we don't have clear discussions about such a situation, we are not serious. We are not serious for our soldiers, we are not serious for our people.
See, brain dead means that there is not much thinking behind NATO. Now, in one or two instances, in, say, Syria, NATO members were backing one particular group of Kurds, etc., which was fighting Islamic State, ISIL. And suddenly, President Trump removed the American troops and made it difficult for Kurds to function. And he did not have any consultation with NATO members. So at some, Macron feels that there is not enough thinking, common thinking, among the 29 members of NATO, and that's why it's calling NATO brain dead.
However, hours after the broadside, Macron and Trump sat side by side for a one-on-one meeting. The US president struck a warmer tone, stressing that the two countries had done a lot of good things together as partners.
We'll be talking about a lot of things, including NATO and including trade. We do a lot of trade with France. We have a minor dispute. I think we'll probably be able to work it out. But we have a big trade relationship, and I'm sure that within a short period of time, things will be looking very rosy, we hope.
But Trump's diplomatic tone came just hours after he announced new tariffs on French champagne, wine, cheese and other products totaling $2.4 billion, saying the digital service tax France is imposing on US tech giants like Facebook, Google and Twitter is unacceptable. Although NATO leaders sought to make a show of unity as they met to conclude their annual summit on Wednesday, the celebration of NATO's 70th birthday was completely overshadowed by bitter rows over Turkey, Syria, money and the future strategy of the alliance. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Now in France, a nationwide strike that started on Thursday brought the country to a standstill. The strike was triggered by President Emmanuel Macron's plans to radically reform the pension system. Thousands of people took to the streets in various cities, and key transport services were brought to a standstill.
More than 180,000 union members took to the streets in nationwide protests in France on Thursday. The demonstrations in some 30 French cities are part of a massive public sector strike involving railway workers, teachers and emergency room medics. Several unions called to protest to force President Emmanuel Macron to abandon plans to overhaul France's pension system. Macron has said that he wants to simplify France's unwieldy pension system that comprises 40 different plans, many with different retirement ages and benefits. Rail workers, mariners and Paris Opera House ballet dancers can retire up to a decade earlier than the average worker.
Because the governments say they want to implement a universal system, of course they are going to say we are old-fashioned people because we refuse this universal system. But actually they are leveling everything down and they are going to offer cheap pensions. So we would have to work until we are 65 years old. And me, I am a kindergarten principal. I will work until I am 65 and will then retire only to have a pension which is hardly enough to live decently. If I don't own a house, I don't know how will I make do. And then we are told, you must wait for how much your points are worth. Well, it would be rather stupid for us to believe that the value of this index, which has been frozen for years, would suddenly increase.
While the Paris protests remained orderly, clashes between police and protesters erupted in Nantes, Rennes and Bordeaux. Demonstrators threw damaged shops, while police fired tear gas and used water cannon. The French Inter-Union Association announced that the transport workers' strike will be prolonged until Monday. On the first day of the strike, the SNCF State Railway said only 1 in 10 commuters and high-speed TGV trains run, while Eurostar and Thalys have cancelled at least half of their services linking Paris with London and Brussels. 11 of the Paris's 16 subway lines were expected to be completely closed off. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
The United States of America, President Donald Trump is facing a process that could potentially see him removed from office. It will all depend on whether evidence is seen to conclusively prove that he improperly sought help from Ukraine to boost his chances of re-election in 2020. On Thursday, House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi instructed the House Judiciary Committee to draft articles of impeachment against Trump, even as the US president has strongly denied any wrongdoing. Here are the details.
In a televised statement on Thursday, U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi said that she had instructed the House Judiciary Committee to draft articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump over his efforts to pressure Ukraine to investigate a political rival.
The president abused his power for his own personal political benefit at the expense of our national security by withholding military aid and crucial Oval Office meeting in exchange for an announcement of an investigation into his political rival.
Pelosi made the remarks a day after the Judiciary Committee held a hearing in which 3 constitutional law experts called by Democratic lawmakers said that Trump had engaged in conduct that represents impeachable offenses under the Constitution. A 4th expert called by Republican lawmakers called the Democratic-led impeachment inquiry rushed and flawed.
Yesterday, at the Judiciary Committee, the American people heard testimony from leading American constitutional scholars who illuminated without a doubt that the president's actions are a profound violation of the public trust. The president's actions have seriously violated the Constitution, especially when he says and acts upon the belief. Article 2 says I can do whatever I want. No. His wrongdoing strikes at the very heart of our Constitution, a separation of powers, 3 co-equal branches, each a check and balance on the other.
This week, the House Intelligence Committee submitted findings from its inquiry into Trump's push for Kiev to launch an investigation related to former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden, a top contender for 2020 Democratic presidential nomination.
Our democracy is what is at stake. The president leaves us no choice but to act because he is trying to corrupt, once again, the election for his own benefit. The president has engaged in abuse of power, undermining our national security and jeopardizing the integrity of our elections. His actions are in defiance of the vision of our founders and the oath of office that he takes to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Trump also wanted Ukraine to look into the discredited theory that Ukraine, not Russia, meddled in the 2016 US election. Democrats have accused Trump of abusing his power by withholding $391 million in security aid to Ukraine, a US ally facing Russian aggression, to pressure Ukrainian president to announce the investigation. Trump has denied any wrongdoing and called the impeachment investigation a hoax. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Let's take a short break here, but when we come back, we'll bring you some more news from around the world.
For centuries, Delhi has been known for waterworks, given the vast number of kingdoms in the city. Among the earliest ones was a dam at Anangpur village, the city believed to be built by Rajput king Anangpal Tomar. This unique Indian hydraulic engineering structure was built around 8th century, running 50 meters long and standing 7 meters high. This dam was more of a water harvesting structure meant to store rainwater during the monsoon season. Located close to Anangpur village lies Surajkund, the waterworks which is regarded as among Delhi's first organized reservoir. Built in the shape of rising sun with an eastward arc, it's enclosed with a steep embankment made in semicircular shape of stepped stones. These reservoirs took care of need of the city at the time of the shortage of water, given Delhi's topography and warm weather spells. Also, once existed a magnificent sun temple near the Surajkund reservoir.
Welcome back. Saudi Arabia and Russia won the backing of OPEC countries to enforce deeper output cuts from OPEC and allied oil producers on Friday. The measure, they said, was an attempt to head off global oversupply in 2020 and sustain prices.
Top oil producers, Saudi Arabia and Russia, are seeking approval for deeper output cuts from OPEC and allies in an attempt to support prices and head off a new glut building in 2020. The group of more than 20 producers is considering an extra 500,000 barrels per day in cuts for the first quarters of 2020 to take the total to 1.7 million BPD or 1.7% of the global demand. Russian Energy Minister Alexander Novak said this on Thursday.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, in the past 3 years that we've been working, I think the format has shown its exceptional efficiency and benefit for the market, despite skeptics' doubts at the beginning of the course. I would like to once again use the opportunity to thank all the ministers for their collective effort and congratulate everybody with the 3rd anniversary of the Declaration of Cooperation.
OPEC and allied producers pump more than 40% of the world's oil. OPEC watchers had expected OPEC to extend cuts at least until June or December 2020, but non-OPEC Russia objected the move. The cuts are aimed at supporting the crude oil prices and guarding against oversupply as the non-participants, led by the United States, raise supply to fresh records.
Without the producer congregating with each other, working in the most effective way to bring stability to the oil market and energy markets in general, and subsequently to the world economy, where both the producers and consumers will gain a sustainability of supply, a sustainability of economic growth, The market would have to trust us. The analysts will have to believe us. And without which we cannot deliver what we want to achieve.
Saudi Arabia needs prices of at least $80 per barrel to balance its budget, but higher than most of the other producers, and also needs to support the share flotation of its national oil company, Saudi Aramco. Shares in Aramco are expected to begin trading this month following pricing on Thursday that made it the world's biggest IPO. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And in some tragic news coming in from Northwest Africa, the death toll from a migrant boat capsizing off Mauritania has risen to 62 after the Coast Guard found 5 more bodies on Friday. Now, the accident happened on Wednesday when some 150 migrants, mostly Gambians, were attempting to reach Spain's Canary Island when their boat hit a rock. Meanwhile, search and rescue operations continue off the coast. Here is a report.
At least 58 people drowned after a boat from Gambia carrying around 150 migrants sank off the coast of Mauritania on Wednesday. The vessel, which set out a week ago bound for Spain's Canary Islands, began running out of fuel and sank off the coast near the Mauritanian city of Nouadhibou. The International Organization of Migration quoted survivors as saying,
I'm Gary Berry from the Republic of Gambia. I paid around 4,50,000 CFA francs, about $762 to get to Europe. I took the ship with Gambians and Senegalese when the disaster happened, and we were on the edge of death. Thank God we were rescued by the Mauritian authorities. The Mauritian authorities provided us with timely assistance.
83 survivors swam to shore and are receiving assistance. Survivors were photographed sitting in a temporary shelter. Mauritania's Interior Ministry confirmed the accident and said passengers on the vessel included young women.
I am Dia Alpha Sungo from the Republic of Senegal. I am currently living in the Gambia. Now I am in Nouadhibou. I was on a journey to Spain for better work. It was a cruel journey, and we were deceived. Thank God we were rescued and taken care of. Thanks to Mauritania.
In Bosnia, authorities agreed on Friday to dismantle a makeshift refugee camp of freezing, snow-covered tents. But some migrants living there have been refusing food in protest as being resettled. The migrants, who are eager to reach the European Union, say they do not want to be rehoused further away from the Croatian border, which lies just 8 kilometers away.
We don't want to go anywhere. If we are going to any camps, they didn't let us to go past the borders. We don't want to stay in camps. What we should do in the camps? We are just wasting our time. We are just wasting our younghood. If we are staying in these camps, we will stay up to next year. It's about 6 months. And after, maybe we couldn't pass the Croatian country for many years. What should we do? We don't want to stay in Bosnia, in Croatia, or any other countries. Every people trying to go to Germany, France, Belgium, or some other country for better future.
Some 800 migrants are stuck in the Bujak camp, a former landfill area in forests near the northwestern Bosnian town of Bihać. Bosnia is struggling to deal with an upsurge in migrant numbers since EU members Croatia, Hungary and Slovenia sealed their borders against undocumented immigration. Close to 50,000 migrants have entered Bosnia since 2018.
Government try to close this camp, but I don't know where they want to transfer us. Maybe they are transfer us to Sarajevo, but we don't want to go to Sarajevo. If we go to Sarajevo, we should stay in Bosnia. But Bosnia is not good for refugees. You know that they didn't give us asylums or anything else.
Many managed to make it into Western Europe and around 8,000 are currently in Bosnia, most of them in the Bihać area, hoping to get into the EU. A senior European human rights envoy who visited the area this week said living conditions in the Vujac camp were shameful. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Let's now take a look at some other international stories in Global Watch. Indian origin Senator Kamala Harris on Tuesday dropped out of the 2020 US Democratic presidential race, saying she does not have the financial resources to continue a campaign. Her decision makes the California senator the most high-profile candidate till date to drop out of the race to challenge President Donald Trump, a Republican. "23 people, including 18 Indians, were killed in a major blast in a ceramic factory in Sudan's capital Khartoum on Wednesday. More than 130 are also reported to be injured in the fire that broke out at the factory's manufacturing unit after a massive LPG tanker blast. 60 Indians were employed at the company and 53 present at the time of the accident. Prime Minister Modi, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar have expressed grief at the death of the workers. "18 Indians on board a Hong Kong-flagged vessel were kidnapped by pirates near the Nigerian coast on Thursday. According to ARX Maritime, the ship was taken over by pirates on Tuesday, and out of 19 people on board the vessel, 18 were Indians. Meanwhile, the Indian mission in Nigeria has taken up the matter with the Nigerian government. So that's all we have in this edition of World Panorama for you. We'll come back again next week with the top stories, top international stories of the week. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.